We've got a lot of fun things to talk about. So, my name is Mike Scholl. I haven't published a book, and I'm not an international thinker on urban design. I, much like you, am a practitioner. I worked for a local community for 10 years, and I did redevelopment, and now I've become a consultant trying to help other communities learn how to take on redevelopment. This is and before I start, I wanted to just ask everyone a quick question. How many people, just by show of hands, in your downtown, how many of you have that building? And when I mean that building, you know what, people already know what I'm talking about, right? It's that one building. You know, if we could just do something with that building, if something could happen, it would transform our whole downtown, our whole dynamic, create that critical mass that Tristan was talking about, create some of those opportunities, right? Well, what I'm here to kind of share with you is my experience and kind of share with you kind of some strategies and how to take those projects on and get them done. This building here behind me it was the heart of my downtown. It's a dry cleaner. It leaked on the back wall. You see that really funny looking tree. There was some blue liquid that condensed and leaked out of there that was a color not seen in nature. The dry cleaner, as you can see, was going out of business. They stopped paying. The bank didn't want to foreclose because of environmental issues. And I had to go to our city council and say, let's buy this building. If you can imagine that discussion. This was a half block off our down. It was right in the heart of our downtown, a half block off Main Street. As you come up, this is the first building you see before you hit the heart of our downtown. How do you think that impacts the visual? How do you think that impacts the impression you have of our downtown? It's not real good. And I went to our city council and I said, hey, I know you don't want to buy this, but if the bank forecloses, they're going to dump it. It's going to have cloudy title issues. You're going to have all kinds of mess. And 10 years from now, you're kicking the can down the road, and a city council 10 years from now is going to have to deal with this problem that you failed to deal with today. And they looked at me and were skeptical, but I perhaps was convincing that day. And they decided to appropriate the money to buy the building and start the process of getting it cleaned up. This is what it looks like today. This is part of a $75 million development that we were able to do on this site. Where the picture's being taken is a new public plaza where we have concerts and all types of different events. Surrounding it, you can't see, I should probably get a bit better picture of it, but there's new multifamily residential housing, a new hotel, a first-run movie theater with a restaurant. Unfortunately, COVID has not been kind to that industry, but they are still doing very well. And it all occurred because they had the courage to go out and acquire the real estate and help create that vision to make that happen. And so what I'm hoping to impart upon you is some inspiration so you can go back into your community and do the same thing. But there's one thing, there's a handful of cliches or kind of sayings that I'm going to repeat that I want you to learn, and this is the one that I like the most. I want you to repeat it so you'll remember. If you control the real estate, you control your future. So now everyone, I want to hear if you control your future. Yes, so remember that as we go through. So part of what I'm trying to do is help demystify, help teach you about what you could do to start to affect the real estate in your downtown. Like the example that Tristan gave about about the hospital. You know, how come the hospital, the question I have is, when I looked at that is, how come the hospital didn't consider going in? What was going on in the downtown that it didn't go, that they didn't choose to go into that downtown? What was happening? What was going on with the real estate, with the land that they chose to go out by the interstate? So what I want to do is kind of help you figure that out. There's one thing I'm going to go through because I love Excel spreadsheets. I've got an Excel spreadsheet that that you can have, I'm going to give to you. I've got it on a thumb drive. I have a handful I can hand out. I know the conference organizers have some, you can get it. You could start plugging in the numbers and find that building that you talked about in your downtown. Start plugging in those numbers and start identifying what those gaps, what that financial gap is. What is it going to take to get that to happen in your downtown? So I want to empower you to do that on your own. If you have any questions later, if you pull up the spreadsheet and you work through it, when you go back to your community, you can always call me. I love going through spreadsheets. It's a lot of fun. But I'm going to go through that in this presentation and help you kind of understand how to start to affect the real estate in your downtown. And when you go, the one thing you're going to find out is you're going to go back and say, this crazy guy at this Main Street Summit said, we need to start buying real estate and taking charge of it. What are we going to do? And you're going to hear from people and say, you know, development's risky. And they're going to say, development's scary. And they're going to tell you that it's really complicated and we're not developers. We can't do that. But really, if you can't, then who is? I mean, if you've got that building that's sitting around vacant, you know, who is going to take that on? I mean, are you going to wait? I mean, in some communities, you know, you will get developers that'll come in, but, you know, I grew up in Michigan in a working class suburb, and it's a kind of town where you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps sometime. You can't rely on people coming in and taking over and doing it for you. You sometimes have to do it yourself. And I think, especially when you're talking about downtown real estate, you know, you sometimes have to be your own developer. And I want to ask everyone a question. How many people are here live in or work in communities that existed 50 years ago? Probably all of you, right? Because you're here. How many of you expect to have that town be in existence 50 years from now? Right? So what's the history that you're creating today that people are going to preserve tomorrow? We get so obsessed with looking at keeping everything the same, that we forget that we're as much about preserving history as we are creating it. And you have to be able to help transform some of those buildings in downtown to create that history for tomorrow, for my kids or for your grandkids and for everyone else to look back and say, isn't that really cool? We need to preserve that and help save that. So I want you to think about when you go back and you start to talk about it, you know, you're going to hear the no, you're going to hear all the risky, it's complicated, but really the hard part is getting to yes. Because you'll hear it again and again and again. When we were doing the dry cleaner building, so many people told me I was crazy. What are you doing? We had to dig 19 feet into the ground. 19 feet and pull all the dirt out and haul it off. And get rid of it on a dry cleaner. We had to put in vents. There was all kinds of messiness we had to do. But you know how many people remember that today? No one. Do you know why? Because they're down enjoying the concert at the plaza that we were able to build. So remember that. Remember all that criticism you get. Success will wash that away. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when you get to yes. And the other thing I want you to think about too is opportunity cost. This is my pet peeve. I hope there's no publicly elected officials here. If there are, I apologize in advance. But one of the things I think that elected officials always forget to take into account is opportunity cost. There is a cost to doing nothing. If you think about that building you have in your downtown that you're trying to figure out what to do with it and how you're going to do, you know, what are you going to do with it? Ask yourself, what's the cost of doing nothing? You know, with that dry cleaner building that we had in our downtown, I went to our city council. I said, look, it's going to drag down everything you do for the next 10 years. It will cost you more to do nothing than it is to buy it today. Even though it's hard and it's painful and it's awful that you have to make up for a private business owner who left a dirty property in the heart of your downtown. That's just the hard reality. And I think when you're thinking about that and when you're having that discussion, think about it. That is a very important consideration. What is the cost of doing nothing? So now that I've got you sufficiently convinced and you're excited and you're inspired, you're asking me, okay, Mike, where do we start? So I've got lots of charts and graphs. You can have this. This is also in the spreadsheet. If you look at the development process, the first step that you need to understand is understand the control of the real estate. Who owns the real estate? Again, if you control the real estate, you control your future. You get to decide what's going to happen. You get to put your vision in place. You also get, if you start to think about creating that vision, I think Tristan, I think it is lesson 3, I took some notes, where he said, make sure you kind of build your vision, build your program, know what you want. As one of my other cliches that I hope you learn is investment follows vision. If you know what you want, even if a developer came into your town tomorrow, would you know what you're selling them? Would you be able to articulate what you want them to invest in? I think that's really important. Do you want more housing? Do you want business? Do you want retail? Do you want primary jobs? What is it that you're looking for? So understand that. And then the rest of it is you kind of work through. That's part of the development process, which I'll get into. But the first step, again, is kind of develop that concept. When we were looking at the project I told you, part of the reason why the city council was willing to take that risk and to buy that was because we had laid out a vision beforehand and said, okay, we know we have a main street that's dying. And one of the things when I started work for the community, they said, the radio station interviewed me and they said, what's the biggest problem you have on your main street? And I said, well, the biggest problem is you could fire a cannon off at Friday at 8 o'clock at night and no one would hear it. And that was great. That was headline for 3 weeks. The mayor was very, very happy with me for that. And what are you trying to do? And I said, but you needed to get people. So part of what we said is, okay, let's go half block behind and a half block to the north, and let's build up our density, and let's bring in residential, let's bring in the jobs and resident, and create some vibrancy on our main streets. So think about it. What is it that you want? What is it that you're going for? And even in smaller communities, I mean, I will guarantee you that any small community has a housing issue. Think about upper story housing. How do you get upper story housing? Is that something that's a goal that you need in your community? So the next part, once you've understood, okay, we know what we want to do, we have this vision, understand your market. Talk to your local real estate professionals. I mean, understand your real estate brokerage community. They're paid to understand what's happening in the market. Go talk to business owners. Go on LoopNet. I did some research just on LoopNet. Are people familiar with that? LoopNet.com. It's just, you get some market listings. You can kind of understand what's going on in the market. And understand what are the lease rates for residential and where is the demand? What are you seeing in your community that the gap that you can start to fill and help fill in your downtown? And then once you kind of understand kind of what your vision is and what your market can bear, then start your evaluation. What is it that who owns the building? Are there issues? Do you have environmental issues? Are there asbestos? Is it 3 stories? Do you have to put an elevator in? Are there ADA issues? And I talked about the availability of parking, but after listening to Tristan, I wish I deleted that line again, because parking, I will say, surface parking is the most inefficient use of space in your downtown, and it is the bane of my existence for a dozen years. And also, the one thing that you forget too, if you work for a community, do they have surplus property? Do you have surplus property that's available? I spoke with somebody last night, and they said they work for a city in a small town, and they said they had a property that the city was looking to dispose of, and they were going to sell to someone who wanted to turn it into storage units. I said, are you kidding me? Again, 50 years from now, are you going to look back and say, God, I'm so glad we built storage units, right? And it's not a knock on storage. I mean, I know a lot of people use them these days, but if you have surplus property, is that really the highest and best use is that something you can market for residential or for something much larger in your community to help kind of fill that void? So think about that too. Think about those opportunities that exist in your downtown where you can start to transform them and leverage those assets that you have. And then the other thing is, understand lease rates. And I'm going to talk about this in terms of income, because part of the title of this was Thinking Like a Developer. And one of the things I want you to understand is, if you think like a developer, developers don't buy buildings. And I want everyone to understand that. Developers don't buy building, they buy income. It's fundamental. When we're in the downtown and we work in these communities and we look and we say, isn't that building cute? I want to buy that building. Developers don't think like that. They think, how much revenue am I going to get from that building? They're buying a stream of income. So understand lease rates and how they work, because the other thing too is it's a measure of economic health over time. So if your lease rates are going up, or if your lease rates are going down, you know, it affects the fabric, your building fabric in your community. Ideally, you'd like them to be going up, because if lease rates are going up, lease rates drive income. If income's going up, that drives investment. Because if I'm a developer, again, I'm not buying a building, I'm buying income. And if I'm getting income and I'm getting investment, then I'm driving retail sales and demand, and that's, again, driving lease rates. And this is kind of the cycle that you're trying to get to. That's the economic sustainability for the real estate in your community. So I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna get to my spreadsheet, which I promised. But I just wanna kind of reinforce that idea of buying income. And I went on LoopNet and I pulled a handful of communities, and I looked at some of the lease rates. These are just examples, and I plugged it in, assuming, you know, just an average 5,000 square foot commercial building. So if I'm in West Fargo and I can get 20 bucks a square foot, I'm getting $100,000 of income on a 5,000 square foot retail space. If I'm in Stanley, North Dakota, and I'm getting $495, and it's not a knock on Stanley, you're just getting less money, you know, where do you think the developers are gonna go? Because again, developers are buying income, they're not buying buildings. They're gonna go to West Fargo, and they're gonna go to Minot, and they're gonna go to Watford, and then maybe a place like Stanley. And part of the reason, I'm not trying to pick on Stanley, North Dakota, I'm sure it's a very lovely place, I've never been there. But part of it is what I'm trying to impart is sometimes in small communities, you can't rely on developers to come in. They're not gonna come in the way you need them, and sometimes you have to be your own developer and think like that. That's what I'm trying to impart. And then this is just kind of an example of how how some of the business, how the retail sales will drive lease rates drive income, income drives investment. So if I have a 3,000 square feet is a typical restaurant size, maybe a little bit large. If I'm doing $200 a square foot, I'm getting about $18,000 to $21,000 before profit. And you can see how that works out. And then if you project this out to rent, ideally a restaurant is about 6% is their occupancy cost, that includes utilities. So they've got about $36,000, you know, so rent and their cost is about $3,000 per month. So again, if you look at some of the retail sales, where do you think that investment, where do you think the developers are going? They're gonna be going to the places where they can get the most income. One of the other kind of phrases and cliches, I won't make you repeat this one, but is real estate developers are like water. They're gonna follow the path of least resistance. They're gonna go where the income is. And so keep that in mind when you're looking at development. And it's not about, one of my pet peeves, I came out of a planning school and I do economic development, is sometimes there's this reliance on, well, God, if we just make the sites ready and redevelopment ready and permit ready and shovel ready, but it never takes into account the market conditions. Because it was like the Oklahoma example. It's like you set everything up, but they didn't come because the market conditions weren't there. So think about what your market can bear as well. So now, as promised, I'm gonna get into kind of this hypothetical case study. Part of what, again, I'm gonna reiterate, what I want to do is give you a tool that you can take with you back to your community, that you can start to plug in numbers when you look at some of these development projects and understand what the financial gap is, you know, where the inputs are, what the likelihood of getting investment is going to be, and start to take charge of it a little bit and start to be prepared. I will say, if you don't like spreadsheets, if your eyes glaze over, my apologies. I play with spreadsheets all the time. I like them. I think they're fun, which maybe makes me kind of weird. But when you get this, if you go back and you start to plug it in, if you get stuck, feel free to call me. I love talking about this stuff. So when you open up your spreadsheet, I have them on these thumb drives too. I've got a handful if anybody wants one. And it includes the slides to the presentation as well, so you can go through it. But the first tab on the spreadsheet is your hard cost. It's your hard cost and your construction cost. So when you pull it open and you pull open this first tab, you could start to plug in how much is it going to cost for me to acquire the building in terms of square footage. It's a 15,000 square foot, 3-story building, just a hypothetical for easy math. It's going to cost me, the owner said they'll sell it to us for $525,000. Okay, that's about $35 a square foot. I plugged that in. I know I'm going to have to go in and get rid of some asbestos or some mercury switches or something, so I'm going to plug in $5 a square foot for demolition. And then the first, second, and third floor, I'm just plugged in some numbers. $15 a square foot. If I'm assuming it was a restaurant before, it'll be a restaurant again. There'll be bathrooms. We'll just have to do some tenant finish. Plus $35 a square foot for each of the 2 upper stories. And I'm assuming at 5,000 square feet, you could fit about 4 units of housing per floor, roughly. So that comes out to about just over $1 million when you include the construction costs and the acquisition cost. So now, I almost forgot. Sorry, we should pay attention to my PowerPoint as well as my spreadsheet. So again, construction costs can vary. I plugged in $35 a square foot. If it needs a lot more work, go look at it. Go walk the building and understand, if it requires more work, then plug in $75 a square foot. Start putting in numbers to see how it comes out and how it plays out into, how the gap is identified. And then the next sheet, and these all work together, is the soft costs. And soft costs generally are about 15% of your total development cost. Your soft costs include things like hiring an architect, hiring an engineer, your developer fee, things like that. You plug those in. Generally your fees, your permit fees, things like that, they're about 7.5%. Your developer fee is probably 2.5% to 7%. So if you're looking at this, you can look at this from one of 2 ways when you take this back. If you've got a developer that's interested, if you're fortunate enough that someone's developing and they're coming to you and they're saying, we need X amount of dollars to make this deal work, you could start plugging in the numbers to see, okay, are they being honest about it? Because developers make money by spending other people's money. They want to spend your money first, not their money. So they're going to ask for as much as they can. So it's incumbent upon you as kind of economic development professionals to understand, are they asking for something that's reasonable? Where is the fluff? Developer fee is one. Keep an eye on that one. Ask them what their developer fee is. Because I think it is reasonable, it's standard, but if they're taking a 15% developer fee, they're squeezing you for more money. But generally 2.5% to 7%. And don't forget the contingency. If you've got a project that's complicated, you may want to bump that up to 10%. Banks will usually require 5%. So if I could just pause for 1 second. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Is this making it all any sense? Or I know I'm running through these quickly, and I'll get to the crescendo at the end, but I just want to check in and make sure that I'm kind of going through this in a way that people understand. Is it good? I'll keep going, because I love my spreadsheets, which will soon be your spreadsheet. So then once you understand what the construction costs are, then you can start to plug in the lease rates, because you're all good. You've listened, you went, and you understand. I know I can charge $900 a month for these residential units. So you plug in $900 a month for 8 units. You plug in a 7%. I have a 7% vacancy rate built in. Your banks will require it, so you have to include that in there. Plus all your fixed variable and operating expenses at 10%. And then compare that against the debt coverage ratio. Excuse me, let me pause for 1 second. Once you back out all of your, if I can get once you take your income and then you back out all your expenses and your vacancy, you get a net operating income, and you divide that by a debt coverage ratio, And essentially, debt coverage ratios, it's a number that banks use. And they want to see that you have $1.25 of revenue for every dollar of debt that you're obligating. So once you divide your income by the $1.25, that tells me that you have got about just under $85,000 to service debt to fix up your building in your downtown, where you're going to be the developer. And again, remember income. Developers are buying income. That is, they're not buying buildings, they're buying income. So understand what that is and what that means and how it's derived. So then the next sheet on the spreadsheet that you're going to take with you is the sources and uses worksheet. And this is the most important piece. So you're going to bring both the revenue side together with the cost side. So equity, if you plug in equity, generally if you're working with a developer needs to bring equity. If the developer's not bringing equity to the table, again, they want to spend your money first, not theirs. But make sure they've got some skin in the game. I think that's really important. When you're doing your analysis in your community and you have to go in front of your board or your town council and they say, is this a good deal? Am I spending too much money? Or are we putting in too much to make this work? You can say, no, they're putting in 10% equity or 15% equity. So the developer does have skin in the game. So building permit fee waivers, again, we talked about that as a cost issue. If the community, if you have that, if you can waive those, that's a good source of equity, a good way to reduce costs. Usually they don't make or break a project, but they can be useful. And then your loan is essentially based on the ability to pay, but you have to also understand the value of the building once it's completed. Even though at 80, the case study that I'm doing at 80, you're getting $85,000 a year that you can put towards debt, and you can loan it, but you can get about 2.5 million available that you can loan off of that income stream based on the terms I've laid out at 4% or 4.5% for 25 years. It doesn't necessarily mean the bank's going to give you that money because they want to make sure that the value of the building matches the value of the building is more than the loan that they're going to be giving you. So. And then if you go to the bottom, it's green, so that means you have a viable project. So when you go back, you plug in these numbers. If you get green, that means it's a good project, and it pencils out. Now, going back, what happens now? You go out. This building owner that said they'd sell you the building for $525,000, all of a sudden says, "Well, now that I know you're interested, now that I know you want to do real estate, the price just doubled." Because that never happens, right, in downtowns. I had a guy, when we started, the gentleman who owned all the property in our downtown, he hated government, and he owned tanks, World War II tanks. If you've ever seen any World War II movie, one of his tanks was probably in it, and they fired. And so he was always delightful to deal with, and so So you have to deal with difficult people sometimes. But assuming that now your building costs just doubled, now your financial gap went from being penciling out in the green to now you're in the red. Now you've got a financial gap. So now it's not viable. So now you have to figure out a way. Okay, how do we fill that gap? So again, this is your tool. As part of my presentation, I'm giving you all the spreadsheet so you can go back to your downtown and you could start to do these real estate analysis on your own. You could start to look and see what's happening, start to plug in these numbers. I'm giving it away to you. If you start to fill it out and you're confused, call me. I'm not the kind of consultant, I'm not nickel and dime you on consulting fees. I love talking about this. I used to be in your shoes. So if you want to go play around with it and you get stuck, just feel free. I want this to be useful to you, even though I know it's hard to go through an Excel spreadsheet in a crowd of 300 people in an auditorium. So my apologies for that. But let's just talk a little bit about another scenario. Now, construction costs just doubled. So now instead of $35 a square foot, you've gone up to 70. Because again, right now, construction costs are volatile. If you can't, I'm doing a project in Laramie, Wyoming. I'm working for the Laramie Main Street Alliance. They're their own developer. They own a building. They're doing 3 units of housing on a 3rd floor in a building they own, and I'm the developer for them. And we're about to go through financing. We're about to close on financing this week. So if I'm a little, earlier in the week I had all my hair. Now we're going through financing. I have none. But when we started, we had projected a certain number based on a square footage, based on construction cost a year ago. We came back and we went through and those costs doubled, and it literally doubled. I mean, try to get a refrigerator these days. I have to buy 3. Just trying to project out to have one in February when we open. So things like that happen. So now, our construction cost just doubled, and now your financing gap just went to $420,000. So keep in mind, these things can happen. Be reasonable with some of the numbers that you plug in, and understand that when you go through these processes, you might come out with a financial gap, and that's okay. The other thing I want to just kind of take a half step to the side. This was a Dollar General in Wilton, North Dakota, and part of it I talked about understanding value, how properties are valued based on income, and it's a cap rate. Are people familiar with we hear the term market cap rate or capitalization rate? It's a really counterintuitive thing in real estate, because the higher the cap rate, the riskier the project is. The lower the cap rate, the less risky it is. So if you look, this is a listing, and they gave me permission to show you. Their net operating income is $84,000, not unlike the project that we were looking at. They determined that a cap rate of 5.75%, and then you divide the net operating income, $84,000, by 5.75%, and they derived the value of just under $1.5 million. 5.75 is pretty low. Which means you've got Dollar General. It's a high credit tenant. It's not a very risky project and not a very risky investment. So they use a lower cap rate. When I started doing projects in a downtown that was unproven, I had developers that were giving a 15% cap rate, and which was just impossible. Which basically means that they were saying that once everything was done, the building value was going to be really low, which means they weren't able to obligate any debt at the front end to make that investment. So keep that in mind. And again, this is just simple. This is from the spreadsheet. If you look at the net operating income page and you divide that by 7%, then you get a value. That building that I showed you, the hypothetical 15,000 square foot building, would be worth about $1.5 million when completed and when leased out. So after I showed you, we go back and you see the red, and you have a construction cost just shot up, or the building owner is not cooperating anymore and wants to double the price, and you've got a big financing gap, and all the people that came out and said, see, I told you, real estate's risky, it's complicated, we can't do it. We can't do it, don't do it, so why are we doing it? That's where where you come in, as community leaders, as somebody who's saying, I want to build something that's going to stand up 50 years from now that my grandkids will be proud of. I want to be able to go back and show them our town, what it looks like 50 years from now. And you have to kind of break through that, and that's the hardest part. I recall when I was going through some of my effort, one of the city councilors said, he pointed at me and he said, Mike, we're not going to let you play developer on our city's nickel. And strangely enough, like 3 years later, he voted to appropriate money to acquire property to do a $75 million project. So, persistence is a good thing. Persistence is a virtue. Real estate development is a long problem-solving effort. Once you solve one problem, you're going to hit another problem. Something will come up. You can't, the project I was talking about in Laramie, construction costs went up because we couldn't get lumber. So we had to switch to metal. metal framing. Now we're not sure if we can get a refrigerator. Who wants to move into an apartment that doesn't have a refrigerator, a dishwasher, or a washer and dryer? Probably not many people. So you have to be prepared to deal with these things, and you have to be able to go out and find other funding, find other sources of funding, figure out how you're going to change course, because it's going to happen no matter what when you're your own developer or when you're working with the developer. The project I was talking about before that I did in our downtown, we built a parking garage. It was not similar to the Lights project, I think, not too far from here, where we had a parking with some residential and some other amenities. That one I think is pretty impressive. We went underground with parking, and we realized that the engineer hadn't accounted for water. Even in Colorado, we do have water. And when your city manager is a water engineer, guess what your city manager is going to focus on? The water issue. So we had to stop and we had to deal with it. We had to redesign basically what amounts to a giant sump pump in a parking garage. So, when you're going through that, don't get discouraged. Persistence does pay, and I think it's really important when you're looking at real estate. From start to finish, a good real estate project takes 2 years. And that's if everything goes well. So, the project I showed you that I did, it took me about 10 years. And I will say though, it's a little bit of a humble brag, so again, my apologies. I did the initial vision in 2009 and said it was going to cost us about $15 million. When we did the project in 2018, it was finished in 2019, 2020, we had spent 17 and a half. So it was off by a little bit. But anyway, I think it's, when you're going through that, kind of understand there are some challenges in front of you, but it's really worth taking on, especially if you want to transform your towns like Tristan and Chuck were talking about. Being able to understand and speak the language of real estate is really, really important. You do have some other sources that are available. If you're doing housing, the Housing Assistance Council, they're a national group that focuses on rural housing, on communities, small rural communities, helping to build housing. The USDA has pre-development funding. Your North Dakota Housing Finance Agency has funding. And also I met somebody today from one of the local community foundations. They're a great source of funding. I did a project on a historic theater. Our community foundation, I went to them and said, hey, we're going to do a 20,000 square foot expansion to a historic theater. It's beyond what the city wants to pay because we have this extra space. And they said, Mike, we'll go raise $750,000 to fill that gap. And we want some naming rights and a few other things, but so talk to your community foundations if you haven't already. They're kind of great sources of funding. And also, I have to tell you, this morning listening to your governor, I am ready to call my wife and tell her I want to move to North Dakota next week. Just listening to kind of a governor talk about walk scores like that, I know I'm kind of dorky about it, but that was really exciting. Listening to him, talk about urban planning and the importance of it, and being so thoughtful in his approach, I think was really great. And the fact is, my session, I was really excited, and I don't know if the people from the Bank of North Dakota are here. If they are, thank you, because they were excited to sponsor this session. When he said you've got $396 million of funding available, and especially if you're a small community and you're wondering where you're going to get funding from, I almost fell out of my chair. You've got resources here to start taking on these projects. You've got more, it's enviable, the resources that you have at your disposal. So I really think it's important, to go back and to start thinking about, okay, what can we do? How can we prepare for that opportunity? Because, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So you're lucky, you're just lucky it happened. It was no, because you need to be prepared and understand, even if you go back and you start plugging in numbers, you take my spreadsheet and you start looking at numbers and start saying, okay, well, we know we can do this. We know this one may be a little bit farther off. You never know what's going to happen a year down the road when somebody comes back to you and says, hey, I think we're interested in this. You could start to have that conversation with them about what it's going to take and what you think those gaps are and how you might be able to fill that gap to make it work. So So be prepared and be ready to take advantage of those opportunities. And I think hopefully I'm going to provide you with a tool that you can start doing that in your community. And again, I'm going to go back. These are kind of my sayings, my phrases that I use often. Persistence is a virtue. I mean, again, these real estate projects, they take a lot of time, and you're going to run into problem after problem after problem, and you have to be persistent, and you have to stay on it. I mean, when you talked about the communities like Surrey and some of the other the different communities, I guarantee you, if you sat, I'd love to sit down and have a beer with those people and start to talk about everything that went wrong. I'd love to sit down, whoever did the lights, if they're here, that project, because mine was very similar to that. And just sit down and have a beer and just tell horror stories about everything that goes wrong. But you know what happens when you're done and you get to hang out there? Nobody remembers that, except for the people like me that did it. But nobody remembers that because it's amazing how your critics wash away when you get success and when people respond positively to these projects. So keep that in mind. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. Again, the phrase I told you, if you control the real estate, you control your future. The governor talked about return on investment. If you're buying a property in your town for redevelopment, you are buying a tangible asset. That asset has value. Remember that. So many times people say, we give away money, we'll give it a grant, you go hire someone, we'll do a study, we'll do a plan. Once you get that plan, that money's gone. If you take that money and buy, don't hire me. Take the money you want to hire me to do redevelopment and go buy a property first and then figure it out. Because if you have a property in your town, you have a tangible asset, you control your future. You can help decide how it's going to be developed and what's going to go in, what history you're creating today that 50 years from now, someone's going to look at and say, my mom or my dad, or they helped build that. And so that's why I'm living in my community today. And then again, investment follows vision. Know what you want. What do you want your town to be? Because if I'm a developer and I walk into your town and say, God, I was just kind of driving through, I'm looking for, I've got some cash I need to invest. What are you thinking? And if you look at them and say, I don't know, they're going to go to the next town, and they're going to go to the town after that. So know what you want out of your downtown and your community. And developers are like water. They follow the path of least resistance. Again, think in terms of income, not in terms of building. Developers are going to go where the money is the easiest. So they're going to go to places like West Fargo. They may not come, if you're in a small town and you're not getting it, think about being your own developer, because you can't rely on, because they're going to go where the money's easy. And sometimes, especially in small towns, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you got to figure it out and you got to be your own developer. And I think in the end, you'd be surprised. I think in the example I gave with Laramie, the Main Street Alliance that I'm working with, they own the building. They're going to get upwards of $20,000 to $25,000 a year of residual income off the project when it's completed to fund the organization into perpetuity, not to mention the equity that they're building in the building. So talk about they're creating their own sustainability, which I think is amazing. And luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Again, like I said before, understand what's going on in your downtown, play around with some of the numbers, figure that out. And then the other one I want to leave you with is, we are in the forever business. Do you know what developers look at the world in? 3-year terms, 7-year terms, 10-year terms. You're in a community right now. What's the time threshold that you're making that you're making your investment in? Is it 5, 10 years? It's probably 50, right? You're in the forever business. The investments you make today, the change that you make in your real estate is going to carry forward for decades. I mean, the town's not going anywhere. The developer may. The developer may take the money out and go to the next town. But you're still there, and your community's still going to be there. So remember, you are in the forever business. Don't forget that. That's really a critical point. Your threshold for investment is over a much longer period of time. And it's, again, the risk you avoid today is the risk you're pushing for the next generation and the generation after that. So I'm going to conclude now, and I do appreciate you kind of suffering through my spreadsheet discussion. I do have a number of these thumb drives if people want to take it with them, plug it in and start plugging in those numbers. But I hope you found this valuable. I hope you found it interesting. I know I'm not as exciting and dynamic as the earlier speakers, but that's okay. You know, they can create a vision and get people excited, but what I want to do is help you figure out, now that they got you excited about everything you can do in downtown, the question is, how do you do it, right? How do you start to take that on? And so I want to give you the tool, give you a gift of the dozen, 20 years of learning that I've had so that you can take it with you back to your community, start plugging it in and start figuring out, okay, how do we kind of make this happen? So with that, I'm here. If there's any questions, I'll be around for the rest of the day. I don't know where we are on time. I haven't been paying attention, but if people do have some questions, feel free, and if not, I'll be around to talk with you individually. So thank you, everyone.
Mike, thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Appreciate it.